It tells us because I forgot to do this. See, I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to have the screen up, and then we can come on when it's live, right? Then we can be like, it's live. We're live. Here we go. Like our guy Sean says, morning. That's right. Coffee, football, the Audible. It is the Week 10 waiver wire preview where we're going to tell you who to add, of course, shut them down, hold on. All these things are going on. But Bloom, before we jump into the players, and even before we get to Dr. Gene Bramble,
right?
It's about that time where and hopefully not everybody in your league makes the playoffs. I mean, please have a level of competition. I'll sound like James Harrison, like participation trophies, but like you're setting yourself up for the playoffs right now with the moves you do right now. Don't fall asleep. You made it to week 10. You're going to the postseason. These moves could get you over the top.
Yeah, see, it's just like in the NFL where you feel things tighten them up a little bit. You know that your moves have more significance. You know that more is at stake every week, and you're thinking through the decisions. And look, in reality, what is the most satisfying part of fantasy football is getting back to the genesis of fantasy football, which is really putting yourself in the GM seat or putting yourself with the seat with the levers of running a franchise. And your decisions, thinking about how to gear up your roster, looking at your lineup, assessing your weaknesses, looking ahead at team schedules, and really trying to make your move is the opportunity that, in some ways, this is what it all builds to, just like it does in the NFL. And these waiver wire moves, Seesaw, another way I think about it is when I do win a championship, I like to look back at each player in my lineup and think about the path that led me to that player, whether it was a waiver wire or trade or I drafted them and why I drafted them, the ebb and flow. And there's always at least one waiver wire player in there.
To that, I would say double true. Like, what up, B? He says, I thought Sigmund was wearing a runner's headband.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Here's what you're going to do. If you're listening to the audio show, make sure to check us out on YouTube. Even just watch the old shows if you want. Bloom, you're going to get me to have hope about the Steelers. You're going to do it.
That's what I'm doing.
Then they're going to go down like the Hindenburg.
Better to have loved and lost than never loved at all, Cecil.
Oh, I've loved them, but I'm scorned. I'm scorned. I'm a scorned lover. Let's talk to the number one guy on this show. Of course, it is Dr. Gene Bramble. Before we jump into what we've got going on with the waiver wire QBs, first, Dr. Gene Bramble tells us about the injured quarterbacks here in Week 10. Dr. Gene, you're up. All right, Bloom, we're wide netting this thing. So, sure. I know there's a lot of people out there like, there's no way Jameis Winston's on my waiver wire.
Right.
But if he is, double check. 20 to 40% for him. And let's get in Jimmy Garoppolo at 15 to 30% as well. Just these two up at the top.
Yeah. And again, this is driving the apps. We have people in public leagues. I'm not sure. There's always some non-0% owned on some of these players. So we want to prompt players to pick them up if they're out there. With Winston, they had a good game. He looked good. And now Seattle, too. So we're always trying to figure out how much of it's the matchup, how much of it is the trajectory of the player. But we're seeing that with Winston now. He's facing Arizona this week, too. That's good. San Francisco, Jimmy Garoppolo, his best game as a pro. They're facing Seattle this week, who made Winston look good last week. So you can see, this stuff always translates over to DFS, too. Momentum, you talk about windows. The window's wide open for these two guys. And it's another year that is proving in hindsight. I mean, it's great to have a Lamar Jackson, of Russell Wilson, and Sean Watson kind of advantage, Patrick Mahomes. But also, if you were rubbing two sticks together at quarterback, now it's looking like with some of these players out there, Garoppolo, Winston, what are these guys quarterback? 10, 11, 12 at the very highest. They're making it happen for your team. So, as always, there's more than one way to a championship.
Yeah, and even if you're not starting them, you are jock blocking. There's another drink for you out there playing the Audible drinking game, although it's 9 o'clock in the morning in Denver, so whatever. Yeah. I don't judge. Derek Carr, 10 to 20%. Kirk Cousins, same thing. Kyler Murray there as well. And throwing a couple 7 to 15%ers. Ryan Fitzpatrick, and yes, Nick Foles. Sorry, Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, that's where it gets relevant, right? With the Carr, the Oakland offense is looking good. The schedule's great. Not necessarily a high ceiling, but a high floor. Kirk Cousins isn't playing as well as Carr. It wasn't a lot of people pointing fingers at him, or there's that overarching narrative. But for fantasy, it's there, and Minnesota's pass defense eroding. Adam Thielen's banged up, but Minnesota also after Dallas. If Kirk Cousins is out there, they're going to have Seattle, Detroit, the Chargers, and Green Bay down the stretch as they try to push for a playoff spot. That sounds like a lot of passing. Kyler Murray has this good matchup against Tampa. And we thought last week's matchup was not good against San Francisco. Andy Isabella had other thoughts. You're going to have San Francisco again after the bye, the Rams, the Steelers, then Cleveland and Seattle. So that's the thing about Kyler Murray is you might end up having to pick your spots, or he might just continue to evolve. They might continue to make plays at a rate that we didn't expect. We'll talk about this when we get to tight ends too. In some ways, the quarterback and tight end waiver wire, it's almost like a personality test, right? Like what appeals to you in a fantasy quarterback? What appeals to you in a fantasy tight end? Because there are a lot of choices out there. Ryan Fitzpatrick and Nick Foles. Now we get to where you might be making some decisions in more serious leagues. With Fitzpatrick, lost Preston Williams. Pour one out for Preston Williams. Cease.
Yeah, for sure.
His breakout game too. This is cruel. League, the fantasy football gods can be so cruel, really test you, and Fitzpatrick, but he's making it happen. And Indy's defense is not a pushover, but they're not impenetrable either. And even without Preston Williams, you like the way that Ryan Fitzpatrick's playing. He really is the perfect quarterback for a tanking team. If this was like Major League sees, good sports movies. I don't even like baseball, but that's a good sports movie. Ryan Fitzpatrick belongs on the ragtag bunch of losers that everybody said can't win a game. And then Nick Foles, another talk about long and winding roads. Nick Foles, long and winding road through his career. But now it's going to probably, after Minshew's game, probably lead to starting again. And you look at the schedule. I'm going to keep harping on this because it's a momentum schedule. Tennessee, Tampa, the Chargers, Oakland, and Atlanta. Tennessee, Tampa, Oakland, and Atlanta are 4 of the bottom 8 or 10 pass offenses in the league. And Nick Foles is never shy as a passer on the field. He's got DJ Chark, Chris Conley, Keelan Cole's coming on. Talk about him a little bit. So I really like the idea of Nick Foles as a quarterback, and he's played well in December for Philadelphia. So I think Nick Foles is probably underrated right now in fantasy leagues.
Holding steady, Phillip Rivers quickly though.
Yeah, sure.
We see a little more life from the Chargers thanks to Melvin Gordon.
Right, and just so Cease by far, we have some more reflection.
And Phillip Rivers might be out there, honestly.
Sure. Mm-hmm. He bottomed out coming into this one, and they had a rough game against the Bears. But look, this is a situation where so we get used to this by week 4, week 5, right? Like come week 4, week 5, we still see some results that leave us scratching our heads and saying like, I don't really understand yet what I'm looking at when I watch this team. But by the time we get to week 8, week 9, things have leveled off to where team performances are more within the range of outcomes that has already been established by the first half of the season. And this Chargers-Packers game was just bewildering on both sides. I don't know how you make sense out of it, but is this because Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa were doing their thing too? The Chargers all of a sudden just turned into the team that the most optimistic picture expected. And if so, now Phillip Rivers, especially with Russell Okung back out there, he's something. Again, you look at the schedule, Oakland this week. And you also think about Hunter Henry and what he's doing for him. You've got Kansas City, you've got Minnesota, and Oakland again in week 16. So not just Phillip Rivers sees, but this is more of like an on-the-couch Thursday night thing. The whole Chargers offense could be electrified now, and we might be underestimating them, except for old Keenan Allen. He's on the milk carton.
Don't they do this every year, though?
Right.
Every year, it's like, we got high hopes, and they fall apart, and they're slappies, and nobody goes to their games, and then it's like, now they're resurgent and the scrappy Chargers. So
once again, Cease, it's perfect. It's perfect for Phillip Rivers and the Chargers as a franchise in this team that they're the team that plays 16 road games. The deck is always stacked against them. No different this year, but it may have some good results.
Okay, let's get back to the waiver wire list. And, well, Ryan Tannehill, 5 to 10%. Kyle Allen, 5 to 10% as well. And Brian Hoyer, let's talk about him at 3 to 5% this week.
So Tannehill had a good fantasy game, but didn't necessarily play well. The numbers were there. Now, is that a recipe you want to rely on? Against Kansas City this week, you might. We'll see going forward. Kyle Allen, now with this Cam Newton news, his outlook changes. I don't know about him as a ceiling quarterback, but as a floor quarterback, it seems like it's there. He's effective enough throwing. See, Kyle Allen makes some throws where I wish I saw Mason Rudolph make more throws like that. I mean, just nice, confident throws downfield to receivers. They're coming open. Anyway, Kyle Allen against Green Bay. That sounds reasonable. Green Bay's defense is in a free fall right now. Guess who they get next week? Atlanta. All right. Week 13, Washington. Week 14, Atlanta again. Week 15, Seattle. I mean, could Kyle Allen and Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore, Greg Olsen, could these guys get red hot down the stretch? This was a reason we thought stashing away Cam Newton was a good idea. Now it looks like Kyle Allen is going to inherit that, starting with this game against Green Bay. Flex to the afternoon spot, Cease.
Flex it up. That's what we do on this program. Let's talk about the one percenters. And by the way, holding steady on Daniel Jones. Did you want to get to that before we do one percenters?
I mean, just, he's running, and the schedule's good. The Jets this week, the Jets and the Giants. It's one of the worst games of the year so far. So, again, it's a personality thing because you could see Daniel Jones running for a touchdown, throwing for a couple of touchdowns in some of these matchups that he has left. He's got, in addition to the Jets, he's got Green Bay, he's got Miami and Washington in weeks 15 and 16.
All right. We are reacting in the chat room as well. Richard says he misses me hearing me talk about Dr. Roxo. Bloom, we just need more players to get caught snorting cocaine. So
I saw something about the NHL. Cease. I know you're not a hockey guy. You got the Avalanche there at the Lanch. That's becoming more prevalent in drug use in the NHL. So maybe that's the next dramatized series.
Okay. Yeah, maybe. All right. So let's move on to the one percenters. Brandon Allen. 1%er. Chase Daniel, Ryan Finley, Dwayne Haskins, 1%er, even though they're Bill Callahan's like, we're the dumbest team in America. No, that's when he was coaching the Raiders. He said that. But he's like clandestine with this. Just throw in Dwayne Haskins. What are you doing?
Yeah.
With Brandon Allen, we know he's got a couple of games left before the Drew Lock experience happens. And by the way, those couple of games are Minnesota and Buffalo on the road.
Oof. Yeah.
Not good. But anyway, let's talk about these one percenters.
Yeah, and it's all two quarterback super flex. We've got to make a nod to those leagues. I hope and expect that trend to continue in fantasy football. Brandon Allen was functional. CCU described it well before it happened. It made the offense functional. And some of it was running into Cleveland's destiny, Cleveland's downward arc, and Brandon Allen just got to surf that a little bit. But as you said, I'm not sure what else we're going to see from him. Chase Daniel, when do they pull the plug on Mitchell Trubisky? We'll see. I mean, Trubisky can't get it done against Detroit. What that defense is doing, that would be a cue. Ryan Finley. And look, this has been the year of the backup quarterback where some of these guys, including Brandon Allen, surprise us. Maybe Ryan Finley could surprise us. He'll be better than Jeff Driscoll and Dwayne Haskins. And there was baby steps, some baby step stuff to build with Haskins. The question is when Case Keenum's out of concussion protocol, it's not a yeah, there you go. Will they stick with Haskins? And I imagine at this point, that's the rational thing to do. And I want to point out too with Matt Moore, even though we've heard that Patrick Mahomes, or looks like Patrick Mahomes is coming back, he might not. And Matt Moore would be an excellent start this week against Tennessee. So you might want to hold on to him. Or if you're in 6 teams on bye, Philly, Washington, Denver, Jacksonville, Houston, and New England, you might need a quarterback. And Matt Moore is probably better. I'd rather start him over Ryan Tannehill.
Right. Our preview show is going to be pretty damn short this week with 6 teams on bye, but I'm sure we can fill the space. So let's do that. And let's talk about the running back position next here on our Waiver Wire special. But before we jump into that position, Dr. Gene Bramall joins us again to discuss the injured RBs in week 10. Okay, Bloom, wide net in this thing, but not really when Kenyan Drake's out there. And he almost deserves just his own segment. Mm-hmm. Devin Singletary, I love the fact that we're finally getting to see him take over. Damian Williams can rip off 90-yarders. Yeah, 50%. So yes on those guys. But Kenyan Drake almost deserves. He's free. He's released. It's incredible what he's now able to do. And yes, he might actually, this isn't wide netting it with Kenyan Drake. He might actually be out there.
Yeah, he might be. And look, there's another layer to this too. We apologize, and people are understanding, really. We have the most understanding audience. Thanks, everybody. Thursday night, by the way. Thursday night was a real good celebration of our community. That even if you're not looking at these players as waiver wire choices, you're looking at them as buy low, sell high, or buy high, sell low choices, and taking a stance on Kenyan Drake. Now, it sounds like David Johnson's going to be okay, maybe even play this week. I'm super simplistic, and I just look at what Kenyan Drake did, and we've seen this in him. So have this extra added piece of information that appeals to me, Cease, which is that he turned down an extension from Miami. He wanted out of Miami. When he got out of Miami, that was exhilarating. That was a shot in the arm. I mean, think about the trajectory of our own lives. I mean, Kenyan Drake's on a high right now, and he did it against a defense that nobody's been doing it against. So if I've been sitting on the hammer so that I could have first waiver priority, or I could outbid everybody for a player, this is when I'm going to pick up and use the hammer. David Johnson, be damned. I mean, David Johnson, is he going to stay healthy? David Johnson can also play a role as a receiver. I really do think that David Johnson, from this point on in his career, would be better off served as primarily receiver, James White kind of player at this point. Not that that means his fantasy value will take a great hit. So I'm inclined to tell people, take a chance on Kenyan Drake. It worked 2 years ago, and we're back. And Tampa, we saw Chris Carson crack that run defense. We saw Drake, again, crack a very tough run defense. I'll go right back to the well with Drake at least as a flex this week, even if David Johnson is active.
All right. Well, let's keep it going and keep going down that list, which is 40% for Matt Breida. Ronald Jones taking over, excuse me, as a frog takes over my voice. Bruce Arians, he's taking over. Peyton Barber's barely playing. And Ronald Jones will be the man for them. So 20 to 40% for him, 15 to 30 for Jalen. Damn. And Duke Johnson Jr., 15 to 30%. Let's keep that usage going. By the way, Alexander Madison might be out there 15 to 30% or holding steady at 15 to 30%.
Right. And I realized I need to, I gave all that take to Drake. So let me make some oxygen here for Singletary and Williams before I move on to the next group. So look, again, remember the one time that someone said we didn't tell people to pick up Odell Beckham, but we talked about him for 7 minutes, and they realized maybe we should pick up Odell Beckham during his rookie year. So take that for what it means about Kenyan Drake. But Devin Singletary looked great too. And I like the way that Brian Daboll's humble. Just get him in the ball in space. I mean, this is simple. Sometimes football's a lot simpler than coaches make it, Cease. And Devin Singletary, get the ball in space. Let him make decisions.
Football's a lot simpler than a lot of people make it. And I understand, and I respect analytics, and I respect advanced data, and I love watching film. Football doesn't change. There are certain basic plays that you try to do that you sprinkle things in with. Motion usually now, but it doesn't change. It's a beautiful and simple and physical and wonderful game.
And one where if you can align what players are good at or where they have gifts with what you ask them to do on the field, it produces good results. And it did for Devin Singletary. And this Buffalo team has a great schedule. Cleveland this week. And we saw Philip Lindsay scoot away from the Cleveland defense a couple of times last week. So you like Devin Singletary's momentum here. If it was Drake versus Singletary, I'd probably go with Singletary. And then Damian Williams third. But Damian Williams is still a 50+% guy. I mean, let's just look at this again. And this is maybe hearkening back to Adam Harstad and the idea of the first 4 weeks of the season aren't predictive. And not until we get to week 5 do we throw out ADP. And we had an ADP of Damian Williams that projected big value. And we've thrown that out. But now it seems like with the 91-yard touchdown run, he is back in the good graces of this coaching staff. And this is the Kansas City offense. I mean, that was what we were wanting. And that's still, especially when Patrick Mahomes is back, that's intact. Now, 20 to 40% Ronald Jones. And they're finally, it took 2 months, but finally Bruce Arians has acknowledged he's the best running back. We're going to give him that opportunity. Now, you're still relying on the Tampa running game. You're still relying on something that hasn't been producing consistent value. But, Arizona this week is a good place to start, although they bottled up Tevin Coleman last week at least. I'm not necessarily ready to put him in the lineup every week this way I would with a Devin Singletary at this point. Matt Breida looks great. I mean, it's the same story. See, we're just stuck in the loop with Matt Breida. He looks great. They're not going to give him a true feature back workload because he already gets dinged up regularly with the workload he has. But sometimes, he'll make you feel like this is someone that needs to be in my lineup every week. This is somebody that's going to be successful every week, and then he gets hurt. So we'll see in Seattle this week, but he might have been dropped. Duke Johnson, his role is not necessarily going to grow in this offense. He's still part of this offense, but he's making more of the opportunities he has, which could get a few more opportunities at the margin. Duke Johnson's one of those players, if he just gets 2 or 3 more opportunities a week, now all of a sudden he's, again, like a James White, like a player you're really relying on. Jalen Samuels, the main variable of his value is James Conner's absence, probably for 1 more week. Now, Samuels didn't look good as a runner. The Steelers' running game just didn't look good, honestly, against the Colts. But Samuels meshes perfectly with Mason Rudolph's check down. Captain check down is back.
Yeah, woo!
So rack up those receptions, and Alexander Madison leads the parade. And I suppose repetition will create osmosis here that your bench should be stocked with backup running backs that are hopefully decent talents, hopefully the clear backup, it's even a 3-down backup, hopefully in a good pass offense. Good run offense, and behind a running back that at least has an injury history. But really, with any running back, there is inherent injury risk.
You are tempting me to go Thursday night with this topic, Bloom, because only if Devlin Hodges was in there. As football is the ultimate meritocracy, unless you've been waiting for a while and you're just the guy. Like, okay. Now I'm totally off track. Let's get back on track and not overcorrect the thing.
Yeah.
And let's talk about Raquel Armstead at 10 to 20%. Kareem Hunt is back this week. He will have a role behind Nick Chubb. So the Dontrell Hilliard role, but will it be a little bit larger? Will it cut into Chubb a little bit more than Dontrell Hilliard was, Bloom? Fantasy GMs want to know, but 10 to 20%. Carlos Hyde, 10 to 20% if he's out there. Rashad Penny, yes, him, 10 to 20% as well.
Yeah, Armstead's part of that backup running back parade again, although he did some things in the passing game last week. And again, with expectations of success for the Jacksonville offense down the stretch, if Armstead were in Leonard Fournette's injury history, all this stuff looms. Carlos Hyde, the thing is, his weeks, even though he's had some success of lack punch, I'm not sure if he's out there or not, but this is kind of expressing lukewarm feeling about Hyde, because you got Baltimore, Indy, New England, Denver, Tennessee, Tampa after the bye. That's not a good schedule against the run. And he may get some short rushing touchdowns. I don't know that he's going to really get rolling against that schedule. And I would rather have, obviously, as we've gone through this, I'd rather have Duke Johnson than Carlos Hyde at this point. Rashad Penny, a backup running back. And also another chance to point out Chris Carson's fumbles are back. And then Kareem Hunt. And you're picking up Kareem Hunt with the idea that Kareem Hunt is so good that he's just going to create his own destiny in this offense, that he'll at least get the Dontrell Hilliard role, but he'll do enough, add enough value to those touches that they'll say, well, maybe it's like magical thinking, right? But Cleveland, this is how you get yourself out of this dead end, right? You tell yourself, well, Kareem Hunt's going to be back, and hopefully Todd Monken, maybe a change, Todd Monken more input or something, like some self-scouting. A lot of the best coaches are great self-scouts. This is where Sean McVay has failed, I think. Knowing your weakness, knowing your blind spot. And Bill Belichick knows his blind spots. Bill Belichick knows the things that are his bugaboos. So I just think Cleveland, Freddie Kitchens, this is your moment. This is your moment to be humble enough to realize that you might not have all the answers and you need to trust other people. So maybe Kareem Hunt can be part of some sort of turnaround against Buffalo this week.
Final group of running backs, because we'll lump in Bilal Powell at 5 to 10% there and 3 to 5% for Gus Edwards, Mr. Touchdown Vulture. Reggie Bonifon is a percenter. Darius Geis, 1%er. J.D. McKissick, 1%er. Adrian Peterson, Jalen Richard, a couple of holding steady guys, and Tony Pollard and Jordan Wilkins. If you're just joining us this morning, you're going, well, what is Miami going to do at running back behind Kalen Ballage, who I suppose we have to talk about, and also the Jets, Jets adding Josh Adams. So we've got some interesting, super deep running back moves here.
Yeah, and again, this shuffling of spots at the end of your roster can mean everything in the end. I don't know what to do with Bilal Powell. I mean, he's always been a competent running back when he's asked to be. Le'Veon Bell, as of now, have you heard anything about Le'Veon Bell's MRI yet?
No, we're waiting on that.
What about Josh Adams?
What about Ty Montgomery? You haven't mentioned.
He's hurt too.
Yeah,
he's hurt too, which is why Josh, and some say, well, Josh Adams could have been signed for that reason. But we're waiting. This is going to be very dated, but we're waiting. But even if they say Le'Veon Bell's out for the year, like Preston Williams was, I'm not that excited. I mean, the schedule looked good, but then you're watching this offense. You're watching the trajectory of this fan. Talk about needing some magical thinking. So. I don't know. What's the opportunity of the lead Jets running back worth? Probably saying that Mark Walton was worth before his suspension. And I'm not going to put a Miami running back on here, by the way. Patrick Laird. I don't know. Myles Gaskin. Not Kalen Ballage. Probably not anybody. Gus Edwards, and see, I don't know if I've heard even anybody mention. I'm sure around Baltimore circles they talk about it. Gus Edwards looks good this year. He looks swifter, just as powerful, lots of intent, just all that intent. I mean, he is a very functional, a quality NFL running back who adds value, especially in the kind of running game, that kind of downhill running game they have. If Mark Ingram gets hurt, and Mark Ingram is known to be hurt, and as much as I love Justice Hill, and look, we may have a situation here where Justice Hill would get 10 or 12 touches and be fantasy relevant, especially if 2 or 3 of those are receptions with that. But it's Gus Edwards who's going to be the downhill banger. We've already seen him do that and do that effectively. And that was before Lamar Jackson. Everybody woke up at Cease after week 9 and said, Lamar Jackson, wow. And part of that, Gus Edwards can profit from that, can benefit from that if Mark Ingram goes down. So I don't think he's getting the due he deserves as a league winner potential. And Tony Pollard, everyone knows, Ezekiel Elliott, running backs, any running back could get hurt. And Pollard looks great. So I think that if Elliott were to go down, all of a sudden Pollard would be instantly one of the top 10 or 15 running backs. 1%ers, depth. Okay, you need someone to throw in. J.D. Mckissick, he did get open downfield for a long touchdown. Detroit's offense is going to be passing based going forward. McKissick is that passing down back, or at least more of a passing weapon. Jalen Richard with good schedule. Now, again, there's not a clear, I don't want DeAndre Washington really. Even if Josh Jacobs goes down, am I really excited to play DeAndre Washington? Probably not. But I would be excited to play Jalen Richard. And I might be excited to play Richard eventually anyway, because he's another one of those satellite back passing down weapons. And he can help this offense be successful against a very manageable schedule. What a fun story, Cease. What a fun story Oakland is this year. Geis and Peterson are included almost because I just don't want to disrespect either of these guys. Like, come on. We're going to LSU, right? LSU, Alabama this weekend, Cease. Like, just massive. The biggest thing that's ever happened in college football down in these parts, basically.
LSU with a quarterback versus Alabama.
Maybe the better quarterback in the game if he plays. The other one. Anyway, and Bonifant is that handcuffed to Christian McCaffrey. We don't want to think bad thoughts, but it can happen. Even a Christian McCaffrey. Jordan Wilkins would share with Nyheim Hines. And certainly Nyheim Hines would be somebody that would get upgrade enough to be rosterable if Marlon Mack were to go down, although the poor Colts offense is stepping on landmines left and right. But Wilkins, we know, is a good runner. If Wilkins got the opportunity to get 15, 18 carries a game, you'd be happy to have him. So again, the overarching theme, Cease, is the idea of more running back injuries are going to happen. If anything, the deeper we get in the season, the higher the frequency of running back injuries, because these guys are dragging themselves into games. And these backup running backs, like every other year, some of them will play a role in fantasy championships.
Well, as we have our fancy schmancy background right there with Lamar Jackson, and many thanks to my college roommate, Chris Harp, for that. Bleacher Report also had this picture, Bloom, and I want you to, I'll describe it for the listeners, where can't make the throws. When he throws, he hopes. No shot at playing quarterback in the NFL. Move him to receiver. I know who said that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll try not to be an ass. But yeah, let's all take a moment. Appreciate what we see from Lamar Jackson and know that, he's used those naysayers to play some great football. Before we get to the wide receivers, first we have to know who are the injured wide receivers as we sit here facing week 10. And that's why we turn to the one and only Dr. Gene Bramall to talk about banged up wide receivers. All right, Bloom, upgrades, downgrades, waiver wire report available at footballguys.com. And we look over Emanuel Sanders at 50+% if he's out there. Let's throw in some 25 to 50%ers, just a couple, because Devontae Parker and Mohamed Sanu, people might have picked up Sanu and then dumped him after that first game. Devontae Parker with the injuries, which is touchdowns continuing, like he's a 25 to 50%er. So let's talk about Sanders, Parker, and Sanu in this section.
Yeah, everyone saw it Thursday night. It unlocked, and Cecil, again, I'll give you a nod that you said matter-of-factly, Sanders is going to know the offense. Sanders is going to step right on the field and play well. And it's that missing piece. I know I went on that rant Thursday night about, come on, GMs, make the trade. A third and a bump from a fifth to a fourth or whatever it was. Come on. Sanders, and just that, this seems in a Super Bowl window right now. Sanders and what he adds to fantasy teams, helping them be in a championship window. Devontae Parker, he's been playing well and staying healthy. And in some ways, I wonder if no attention being paid to Devontae Parker's career revival this year is part of what's helping it. Because it seemed like whenever people would create expectations for him and coaches would talk him up, was right about when something bad was going to happen. But now with the Preston Williams injury and Ryan Fitzpatrick dealing, then you like Devontae Parker, like in our lineups until further notice. Mohamed Sanu in our lineups until further notice. And see, this is another example where we have to think about, and I feel like I guess I just didn't know or think that the way things are going to go. And the question is, as we look at these New England games going forward against Philly, Dallas, Houston, Kansas City, if these teams can make those incursions into the Patriots defense the same way Baltimore did, and more of the game falls on Brady's shoulders, then he's just going to throw 5 and 10 yard passes to Sanu and Edelman all day. I mean, that's just going to be this offense. And some of it is the Baltimore cornerbacks, all of a sudden they have a formidable secondary. Jimmy Smith, Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Carr. Brandon Carr's their 4th cornerback. It's better than a lot of teams' number 1s. So, things changing, Cease. I think there's an overarching theme here of there was some change in week 9 and some things that we really have to grapple with. But some of that is Tom Brady throwing more means more short passing and Mohamed Sanu getting open in those short zones, racking up PPR points. And I just think we saw the circuit complete real quickly between Brady and Sanu, the throws that appeal to Brady and the routes that Sanu can get open consistently on.
Next section is 20 to 40% for Hollywood. Marquise Brown, Curtis Samuel out there, and Chris McCaffrey's not the only all-purpose weapon the Panthers have. They have another. His name is Curtis Samuel. They should probably use him a little bit more. We're getting louder with Jamison Crowder at 15 to 30%. And we'll save those other holding steady guys because we have a gap here. We have these guys, then we got holding steadies, and we got a bunch of 1%ers. So let's get our 20 to 40%, 15 to 30% guys.
And
out of the way.
I try to stay true to the labels. That's why some of these players are waiver wire pickups, but they're just holding steady. I'm sure even occasionally there are players that are downgraded, but are still waiver wire pickups. But I try not to make it too confusing. Marquise Brown's stock this year has been kind of confusing, but see, with Lamar Jackson and how much we're all fawning over him. And there's a mass psychological. Did you notice in the game, Cease, by the way, because we didn't get to do a real recap of this game, that Bill Belichick didn't go for the touchdown at the end of the first half?
Mm-hmm.
Did Bill Belichick was he scared of Lamar Jackson? Was he scared of that game? Did it cause him to do what he does to his opponents? Usually, shell up a little bit in his decision making.
Well, it gets in your head, bro. I hate to sound like Rafi from the league. I'm in your head, bro.
Yeah.
But when you're facing Lamar Jackson, as we said on the preview show, like it's true 11 on 11 football. Like you can scheme it perfectly, you can call it perfectly, you can know what they're running, and you still can't stop them if Lamar does his Lamar things.
Yeah, it's non-linear, right? I mean, it takes the game out of the realm where you get to control things and you get to keep things on certain tracks. It takes the needle off the record. So don't you think getting in the head of the defensive coordinators that the passing games can open up, right? I mean, you're going to say, we're not going to let Lamar Jackson scramble. We're not going to let him beat us as a runner. We're going to mush rush. We're going to do something where we just keep him stationary as much as possible. We're not going to buy on any of it. Could Hollywood Brown have a massive second half? I mean, Cincinnati this week, isn't that the week? You say, well, his big game was against Miami. Well, Cincinnati's as bad as Miami. This could be Marquise Brown week. Speed looked like it was there. Curtis Samuel. I described the schedule for Carolina. I'll remind you again. Green Bay, Atlanta. Okay, New Orleans. Washington, Atlanta, Seattle, and Indy in week 16. But 5 out of the next 6 weeks, these are really good matchup against the pass. That makes me think Curtis Samuel. Jamison Crowder was mostly one drive. But again, we're looking at the hot zone for Sam Darnold. And even if the Jets continue to lose games to bad teams like the Giants, you're still going to have a certain amount of production, Sam Darnold against some of these bad defenses like the Giants. So I don't know if I trust Demaryius Thomas. I don't even know if I trust Robbie Anderson. And I don't want to drop him yet just in case it comes alive because it can really move mountains in fantasy leagues if that connection gets going again. But Jamison Crowder, I think, is going to be a solid play every week. He looks good, too, not just working the short stuff. And Zach Pascal, we've mentioned Zach Pascal 3, 4, 5 times on the show already this year. But now it's real. Now it's on. First of all, Zach Pascal's out there making plays. He's skying for these balls. It seemed like Brian Hoyer understood that he could trust him to climb the ladder for some of these passes. But now Paris Campbell, broken hand, T.Y. Hilton, still out. You're playing Miami. I mean, at least you pick up Zach Pascal. It's the rock blocking, right? I mean, if Zach Pascal's out there, you just don't want someone else to benefit from that because he's playing well. This is a functional offense, and he's been one of those players that has really, truly come from unlikely backgrounds. A player who nobody gave a chance, even making the team, was on his special teams prowess. So this is a player that's created his own destiny.
Creating your own destiny. That's what it's all about as we continue on. And the holding steady group, Bloom, is pretty thick. A.J. Brown, Corey Davis, McCole Hardman. Let's throw in Kenny Stills and Alan Lazard here as well as all these mid-tier holding steady receivers.
And sometimes the waiver wire move, going back to your speech at the top of the show, Cease, sometimes the waiver wire move that changes your team's destiny isn't getting the hot player or being willing to outbid everybody for a hot player, but it's getting the player who is being overlooked or people are moving on from. And we have a big batch of those guys here, starting with Kenny Stills, injury scare. Houston could play kind of conservative to win last week, but I don't know if that's going to hold. And again, I outlined how Baltimore, Indy, New England, Denver, Tennessee, Tampa, those aren't really pushover run defenses. So I see even more of it falling on Deshaun Watson, and I don't know when Will Fuller is going to be back. And there is going to be a time that we say, stash Will Fuller. He's a week or two away from return. I don't know if we're there yet, if you have an IR spot or something, because it's Will Fuller. The obvious answer here would be Will Fuller, but he's out right now. So it might be Kenny Stills, A.J. Brown, and Corey Davis. It's trusting Ryan Tannehill. He's still Ryan Tannehill. See, for a week or two, we were like, because he wasn't Marcus Mariota, we forgot he was Ryan Tannehill. He's still Ryan Tannehill. He's not in Miami, at least. But A.J. Brown still looks like a bully sometimes. Corey Davis is still Corey Davis. This week against Kansas City, they might start to build some momentum again. And on the other side of that matchup, McCole Hardman, if he was dropped, and he had a fumble last week and didn't really do much, hasn't really been a big part of the offense with Matt Moore. But when Patrick Mahomes comes back, look, Tyreek Hill is hyperspacing around secondaries. Teams are going to put more resources on him, and that's going to lead to more one-on-one opportunities downfield for Hardman. Alan Lazard, and again, I have to go back to how do we make sense out of what happened to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers in LA?
Voodoo.
Or the fish from Airplane. They ate the fish. I mean, that's my go-to thing. But you're right. So if we're ignoring that, and Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers, and Alan Lazard still looks like the number 2 receiver on this team, and hey, Devontae Adams could always hurt that toe, aggravated. Alan Lazard, if I own one Packers receiver right now other than Adams, it's Lazard.
Well, 1%ers pretty thick and pretty interesting as well, because Keelan Cole, Josh Gordon is there, and of course you knew Seattle would have interest. Of course, right. Pete Carroll, come on, grab my acoustic guitar. And 1%er for him, as he'll be opposite DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Magnifique. We'll still be working the slot. Andy Isabella with that speed. Maybe only a catch, Bloom, but it's a big catch for a touchdown. So Andy Isabella is a 1%er. Hunter Renfrow doing more. As we talk about Derek Carr in the passing game doing more. 1%er for him. Chester Rogers with all those injuries. 1%er. Laquan Treadwell as well. And maybe 0.5%er, or just interesting because if Treadwell's on this list, Bloom, I'm going to throw in that Josh Doxson could be back pretty soon. And he's got chemistry with Kirk Cousins. I'll just get crazy, throw it out 0.5%, a sixpence, whatever.
Sure. Why not? It depends on how long Adam Thielen's out. But you're right. There's some interesting 1%er names here. I mean, there's some 1%er names here that over the next week or two could become 25, 50%er names, maybe even 50 plus. I mean, things happen. Things change really quickly around here. So Joe said something like that. Keelan Cole, you're holding him through a bye. So that's kind of, I always like to have my bench usually filled with players who at least could have that explosion of value the week that we're on. So you're giving up an opportunity cost there with Cole, but he looked good, and he was so good, a la Zach Pascal, somebody that really, truly, even in NFL circles, sees, a lot of these unlikely players that hit, you'll find a few people around NFL circles saying, well, I was saying that this guy was going to be good, but then there are players like a Keelan Cole or like a Zach Pascal, or maybe just one area scout who just doesn't even say he's going to be good, but says maybe he could become a player that's worth his roster spot. So Keelan Cole was doing that as a rookie, and his arrow was pointing up, up, up. And then almost like he got shot out of the air, and he started to nosedive and really off of the depth chart last year. Now it's a new Jags pass offense. It's a new Jags passing pie. And Keelan Cole, we were already kind of excited with a Blake Bortles pass offense at the beginning of last year. Chris Conley's up and down. D. Westbrook's banged up. Marquise Lee's banged up. This schedule. I'm liking Keelan Cole. I'm wondering if I should have put him higher here, but again, you have to hold him through the bye. Josh Gordon. Well, the thing about Josh Gordon is that they know how to use a Josh Gordon type receiver. And I'm talking about this Josh Gordon even because of the way that DK Metcalf is being used. And he doesn't have Metcalf's speed, but he definitely has Metcalf's approach to playing the wide receiver position and Russell Wilson's ball placement right now. I mean, it's beautiful. See, for a moment, we have to breathe it in because we lose it in fantasy. You did it for Lamar Jackson. Let's do it for Russell Wilson right now. Like watching a player, and it shows up through the fantasy stats, watching a player like true greatness with a capital G, like exhibit that greatness on the field on a Sunday. I mean, it's a transcendent experience, and it's bringing up his players around him, like Tyler Lockett, who's also been playing at a high level all year. Andy Isabella, Cliff Kingsbury says, I'm not going to make a bigger role for him. But how could you not? Really, man? I mean, seriously, it was simple because Kyler Murray extended the play. Isabella creeps behind his guy, and Kyler Murray's arm talent. And you see, we could put together a cut of Kyler Murray's 10 or 20 best throws this year. And even people who are Kyler Murray naysayers would say, wow, okay, those are good NFL throws. That was a really
I don't think naysayers should have ever been questioned.
Well, that's true.
Like, man,
but arm
still,
talent too, and not arm strength, not being able to throw the ball through a brick wall or something, but just seeing a vector of a receiver and understanding the trajectory and the way to weave it through the defenders. He's got
the way to place it, and the way to place it as well. And here's the thing, Bloom. This is a larger show and maybe a new podcast. When you don't like something and you just continue to hammer on it, even for reasons that don't exist. That's what we saw with Kyler Murray this year. We saw that with Kyler. I don't like him. I don't like anything. No. There's some really good things. There's some
special,
and there's special talent there.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's some singular stuff about his game. So anyway, it sure seems to me that, I mean, I know they had problems about Andy Isabella, and there was stuff that was on the scouting report, Cease. Like, I mean, maybe not necessarily route runner with urgency to create separation early in the route stem. Maybe not a player that the body catches too much, a player who's not going to win contested 4 balls. Okay.
Doesn't have a big catch radius.
Right. But whenever Kyler Murray is able to lead him, and he's able to, again, the play outside of structure, outside of just winning at the route stem, but using your speed to be just tough to stick with when the play goes outside of structure, now we're talking. In some ways, what that play was in your mind's eye when you heard them use the pick they got for Josh Rosen to take Isabella, like, oh, that's what they're thinking, right? If the play finally came to fruition, and it made them able to hang with the 49ers, So why would you put that back in the bottle? Why would you not? Again, football's simple. Football's not that difficult. So I'm going to think about picking up Andy Isabella to see if Cliff's lying, because he has been lying a lot. Hunter Renfrow, he has been. But that's okay, because it's all part of the misinformation game. I think it's silly for teams to play that game. I think you just waste energy on that. Use your energy to make your team better than trying to play some game through the media. Or do it like Belichick and just chonk, like the brick wall comes down. Hunter Renfrow doesn't have a high ceiling week to week, but he's making some plays. This offense is efficient. So that's all working out. Chester Rogers has been around for a while now, and he scored last week with the Paris Campbell injury. He's going to be a core passing player for this pass offense against Miami. And Laquan Treadwell, I don't know if you got to see a lot of Minnesota Casey or not. He looked different last week. Look, there was a play that they targeted Laquan Treadwell deep, and the play didn't work. But he had a little bit of separation. I mean, he was running ahead of the Kansas City corners. He was going up for the ball very strong. He had a different confidence in his movement. I'm not saying he's going to be everything we ever could have hoped he would be. I'm saying, and I forget who it was, maybe it was Zimmer, I'm not sure who it was, said that they were impressed with how he handled his time away from the team. And it can change you. It can, I mean, with Treadwell, it's never been a lack of athletic ability or talent and for playing football. I think it has been confidence. It has been something maybe that he has. So let's just watch this with Adam Thielen out, and after Dallas. Again, if Thielen's out for a while, and the second injury is usually worse than the first, you do have Seattle, Detroit, Chargers, Green Bay after the Week 12 bye. So stranger things have happened in the time we've been doing this, Cease, than someone like Laquan Treadwell mattering in fantasy leagues.
Yeah, and we're talking about what's that weird name that's going to help you win your league.
Yeah.
It might be a name that we've been talking about forever, but has never done much of anything. That's what's likely and what's possible. Always have anything's possible, but what's likely? Let's weigh those, and let's weigh in with Dr. Gene Bramall. Some segues take care of themselves as we move to the tight end position, and Dr. Gene tells us about those banged up tight ends for Week 10. I hear the ice cream man, Bloom.
No, it's the church.
It's the church next to you.
Yeah, there's churches everywhere in New Orleans. Churches and 24-hour bars. If you want to understand New Orleans, just think about a church in one hand and a 24-hour bar in the other, and maybe you could be the kind of person that goes to both.
Okay, well, let's say Lord have mercy for Dallas Goedert at 10 to 20% for him. Let's give him his own section because there's so many 5 to 10%ers. It'll make your head spin.
Yeah, and again, it's the personality test. And I realized that I forgot to mention Darius Slayton as a holding steady.
Yeah.
Well, and this gives us another chance to say
that's holding steady for Daniel Jones too.
Yeah, and with Slayton, part of the story here is Sterling Shepard, and part of the story with Jones is Sterling Shepard too, because he and Shepard were on the same page before Shepard went out. But now he's back in concussion protocol. That doesn't sound good. Your second concussion in a year. So Slayton, again, the schedule. I mean, Slayton could go off this week against the Jets. Something to keep in mind. Okay, so first Dallas Goedert, and then we're going to take the 25 to 10% in one big swoop piece. Starting with Dallas Goedert, Deshaun Jackson's out for the year. Dallas Goedert's going to remain a 70, 80% of the snap guy. He's been converting. He's been fantasy relevant. He's going to stay fantasy relevant. People had left him out there. Then he's going to be in the top 10 every week going forward now with this injury. And perhaps he would have stayed there anyway with if Deshaun Jackson was okay because he's going to stretch the field and open things up, better targets, even in a smaller opportunity. 5 to 10% guys. And I guess what this really stands for, I'm not sure how your teams are doing. What this really stands for is, again, what do we have? We've got the three we expected: Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz. We've got Hunter Henry. We've got Darren Waller. We have, I'm sure there's another tight end or two I'm forgetting here. But the point is there's about 7 tight ends I think you can count on every week. And then the next 20 are about the same. So I don't know who's out there on the waiver wire. And I can make you different pitches depending on what you're more likely to value in a fantasy player. Here's the pitch for Jared Cook. Atlanta this week. I mean, he should be back, but I'm just saying, like, in some ways you might just look at this week's matchup and say, who can build momentum? Because we've had, different, you talk about those window seats, different momentum, different 2 to 3 week periods. Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle. Doyle being the high floor, Ebron being the high ceiling. Again, Campbell and Hilton are out. You're playing Miami this week. Matchup again. And Ebron was a player, there was a lot of stuff, a lot of ink, a lot of pixels about maybe Ebron without Hilton is going to be the player that needs to step up. Well, you're asking a lot when you ask Ebron to step up. Right. But it happens. I mean, he did for the most part last year. Then you have Gerald Everett. Why should we forget Gerald Everett? Now, Brandon Cooks sounds like specialist stuff went okay. Hey, he may even be back this week. I don't know, but Gerald Everett had some big weeks. Gerald Everett's getting open. Gerald Everett's a good player. He was a second-round pick. I feel like because he was latent for so long, we forget. Look, a second-round pick on a receiving tight end at least shows you that the range of outcomes includes one of the best receiving tight ends in the league. It's like a running back pick. So Gerald Everett and the Steelers matchup this week, I'm afraid, is a good matchup for Gerald Everett to get going again after the bye. Noah Fant. Cecil, this is a good one. Let's do a little mini Thursday night. Did that play? And I know it was Cleveland's ineptitude, but did that play change Noah Fant's destiny? Did that change the arc of his career? The 71-yard touchdown run? Because now does he have a confidence and an unlocking of his physical ability that he wasn't able to do while he was just thinking and just a little bit out of phase? Is he in phase now?
I'm going to bring up something that maybe I shouldn't, Bloom, but I'll do it anyway for this show.
Yeah. And
this is very relevant, I believe. That play for Noah Fant may have changed the perception of others in that locker room of Noah Fant. So think about it.
Yeah.
And then think about, we all go to work, right? We all, well, you and I work from home when I go to work too, but think about being around coworkers that maybe aren't as warmed up to you as they need to be, or, there's just a little bit of a disconnect, or there's whispers about you or your questions of toughness. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
And then think about making a play like that and that being eliminated. Now, I mean, did you see him and Vaughn celebrating after that play? Like, and if you have the Vaughn stamp of approval, I mean, it's like high school, right? Which doesn't matter, but I mean, it could be very formative. It's a formative time for Noah Fant, obviously, in the NFL. So think about that, Bloom. Maybe there were some questions from teammates about what he can be and, why isn't he making more of an impact? Why isn't he as tough as he needs to be? Like, maybe there were questions like that. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Lassie bark. And then when you make that play and Vaughn is dapping you up and like now you're the belle of the ball and people and here's the thing. If Noah Fant was a slappy, I would have told you that.
Yeah.
Why did I rant on Noah Fant almost all the time? Because the talent is there. You got to put it together. You've got to play with toughness. You got to show that you're going to go all out. Stop alligator arms with passes as he done all the way back to training camp. So you asked me the question, Bloom. I gave you an answer, maybe a little bit different than you expected.
No, it's a good one.
Imagine being around people that now believe in you and maybe they had questions before.
Yeah. So, we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about. It seems like, this is a waiver wire show. It's just been a good jumping off point to talk about football and what's going on because there's so many interesting things to talk about. So going through the list here, so there's no fan. You got to hold him through the bye, but take that into account. Mckissick. The injury to Preston Williams, he's getting passes downfield. He's looking athletic. He's kind of had his career-changing moment maybe this year. TJ Hawkinson got a little banged up at the end of the game. As long as Detroit's going to be a pass-first team, Hawkinson's interesting to me. And Steelers might be pass-first, but pass 5 yards downfield. Well, that's Vance McDonald's music. Got a big touchdown in that game. Greg Olsen, the schedule. Jason Witten, the volume. And Darren Fells, the touchdowns. Got to hold him through a bye, too. So it's all there. There's a lot of choices here, and some of these players are on the waiver wire. And this may be, again, you're the GM, getting back to that speech I made. So you've roster management. I mean, maybe you don't need an extra running back. Maybe you don't need an extra wide receiver, and you lose the possible opportunity of holding on to Tony Pollard or whatever to have a third option, to see who gets hot, to catch these windows in the schedule. Tight end by committee. You can look at the schedules, line them up, see where the overlap is, carry 2 or 3 tight ends. And also because, again, with some of these guys, especially, so some of the ones I'll isolate here, Noah Fant for sure, Everett, Gesicki to an extent, Hawkinson to an extent, where these are guys who really could go on a jag, get hot down the stretch, and you don't want them on someone else's roster, maybe even Jared Cook, I don't know. It's probably the New Orleans pollution that's making me a little intoxicated there.
All right. That was a big list.
Yeah.
We're not done yet because we have 3 to 5 percenters and Jacob Hollister. And you wonder where Josh Gordon might come into play. Certainly Hollister. We've been talking about in Deep Dynasty, Scuba's Snorkel Submarine. We talk about Hollister every year. Talked to him at the Super Bowl when he was with the Patriots and thought maybe he was the heir apparent to Rob Gronkowski. Well, he's got traded to Seattle. Didn't do much until this last week. But now Josh Gordon's there. How's that take away some red zone looks maybe? Kyle Rudolph, 3 to 5 percenter. And oh, hell, just throw in Nick Boyle, Irv Smith, 1 percenters as well.
Yeah, and see, spending some time on this because really and truly, for some of those teams where tight ends are one whole, there's some of these decisions that you make, you may look back and say, well, because I had Greg Olsen to play, or because I had this player to play in week 14, week 15, it got me through the next week. If I had a tight end who only got me 3 points, I would have lost. So these are some important decisions. You just may not find out the importance for a few weeks. Jacob Hollister was running well against Tampa. Some of it's Tampa. But again, with Russell Wilson, there's just a handful of quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, and poor Russell Wilson. The volume has been low, but now the defense is bad, so maybe the volume's not going to be low. But when you're getting targets from one of these quarterbacks, we always give you the benefit of the doubt to roster you and see what happens. We'll see what happens there with Hollister. See what happens with Rudolph. Again, the Thielen injury. Minnesota's defense being bad, shutting down the pass, not happening. Helping there, Irv Smith. And it's just that Rudolph's more likely to get touchdowns. Smith's better with the ball in his hands. I saw a few plays where they were even getting Smith the ball in his hands in a way you would, a running back or a dynamic receiver. So they know what they have there. And then Nick Boyle. Again, Boyle was the main target against New England. So it's kind of the spinning wheel at this point. It hasn't really landed on Hurst yet. It's been mostly Andrews. And this is a little preview. Hold on. Don't bail on Mark Andrews yet. Please. Cincinnati this week. Things might rebalance themselves, and Boyle just goes back to being mainly a blocker, and Andrews show at tight end. But just in case, hey, Boyle might score again this week. Even if it was just a typical week without Boyle having 5 catches and a touchdown the week before, we'd say, hey, Boyle could score if you need a tight end, 6 teams on bye.
Whew. All right. It's about that time, and you can feel it building.
Yep.
Within the community, within our great audience here on the Audible, that you just gotta scream and shout, right? Isn't that what Ronnie James Dio said? Scream and shout. Mm-hmm. And you just got to join in with us, because it's a great time. Love getting the messages on Twitter, the email, whatever. I love hearing how you guys also interact with us. The chat room has said how they've made people in their offices uncomfortable when they do this, but you have to do it. And if you're timid about it, do it in your mind with us, right? Maybe the kids are sleeping in the car. You don't want to totally jar them and wake them up. So everyone, whether it's mentally, verbally, spiritually, Bloom, it is now time when everyone joins in with us and says, cue the Chuck Anthony! Bloom is on a week time, shut him down.
Wow, shutting them down. And the other half of these decisions sometimes are the things that you rue or the things that you say, I was smart to do that. Gardner Minshew, shut him down. Jacoby Brissett, the sheen was kind of off him anyway. He might even play this week. I mean, he might be a streamer, but also he's not an essential player to hold here. Mason Rudolph, Hooper holding man. Sam Darnold in the schedule. You can't trust. Maybe you trust one of his targets, maybe Jamison Crowder, but you don't trust him at this point. Probably Frank Gore. Not that you're holding him. Chase Edmonds, just in case. Raheem Mostert. He's worth holding as one of these backup running backs, although he has a lower ceiling in some ways, even though he's in a better situation, because he's going to remain in a committee. Ty Johnson, not going to get fooled again on that one. Mark Walton, yeah, the window closed there. Chris Conley, man, we were finally counting on Chris Conley to do something. Demaryius Thomas, again, any given week now, to trust Darnold and a secondary receiver like that. In a short bench league, again, I'm afraid of dropping Robbie Anderson, but it really might be the right move now. Pour one out for Preston Williams again. This sucks, but we open up a spot there. Cameron Brate, OJ Howard's going to be back. Yay. But at the same time, Jonnu Smith, we're going to wait to see on Delaney Walker. But again, trusting Ryan Tannehill doesn't sound so good now. So these are some of the players getting the axe this week.
Well, there are some players that are getting the axe, and there are some players you just can't click that button. Not just yet. You've thought about it, and you're afraid that you even put it out there, right, in the universe. Be careful about what you think, because what you think about, you bring about. You might have thought about these guys, but there are players where you love them. You just can't quite cue the check D on them yet. So, Bloom, in week 10, who are some of those hold-ons?
Yeah, we got any number of Cincinnati receivers, although, man, Baltimore secondary looks good. But guys like Tyler Boyd, even AJ Green hanging in the balance. We're holding on to see how Ryan Finley plays, really. I'm holding on to Carson Wentz, depending on your needs at quarterback. But don't forget, it's coming in week now, New England out after the bye. Seattle, Miami, Giants, Washington. A lot of quarterback. Mason Rudolph could be a good fantasy quarterback against that schedule. Ooh. Make sure you hold on to James Conner. LaShawn McCoy's tough. He's the backup, basically. I mean, you're hoping for a Damian Williams injury, but if there was an Damian Williams injury, then there's Darrell Williams. Is Darrell Williams maybe the better speculative hold at this point? I'm not sure. I still believe in the Kansas City backfield to bear fruit, even though a lot of that is probably going to land in the basket of Damian Williams, the way it's looking right now. I think Sony Michel's still a hold. I know we saw what seemed like a changing of the guard to James White, and that might even be rational coaching, but it also could be the game script. It also could be Baltimore. So Michel, even though he hasn't been running well, still has that multiple touchdown capability. New England still has, Dallas, again, Philly, Dallas, Houston, Kansas City. I mean, those aren't necessarily blowout games, but then Cincinnati and Buffalo. And those are weeks 15 and 16. I mean, Sony Michel against Cincinnati sounds pretty good to me. So I know it's a long time to hold him, but I wouldn't drop him yet. Tyrell Williams, just don't get rash here. He had a tough matchup. He has another tough matchup against Casey Hayward, but he's still playing pretty well. I'm probably holding on to Philip Dorsett for that same reason I was mentioning about Michelle. Just those matchups, and even the idea of Dorsett in some of those Houston, Kansas City matchups. I wouldn't be rash about that. Deontay Johnson. We need to have a talk about Randy Fichtner and Mason Rudolph. But you would think it's kind of like an either-or thing, right? Sorry, we're going over an hour here, Cease. If Juju Smith-Schuster is being taken out because of extra defensive attention, then that should leave Deontay Johnson in good matchups. Or you should be one of Juju and Deontay Johnson should be having a good week every week. And we had been seeing that until we saw the Indy game, but we have a favorable schedule. Deontay Johnson still looks good to me. I still think he could do more down the stretch here. I'm not dropping Christian Kirk yet. I'm not dropping Allen Robinson yet. If they go back to Chase Daniel, you'd feel really bad about that. Alshon Jeffrey is tough. I'm waiting for more news over the bye. I wonder, Alshon, year after year, we'd see him as a player that once the injury seal's broken, he's never quite the same for the rest of the year. Did we pass through that threshold at the end of the Week 9 game? We might have. So he's a tougher call right now. Kenny Stills already mentioned as a hold. I wouldn't be too reactive. Mark Andrews mentioned as a hold. Darren Fells through the bye might be worth a hold because of 5 touchdowns in 5 weeks.
All right. We've gone through the emotions
of
the Week 10 waiver wire special here on the Audible. We certainly appreciate each and every one of you out there for watching, for clicking like, commenting. Chat room's cool. Still need you to comment as well. Subscribing, ring the notification bell, all these things that YouTube makes us jump through because they care about promoting corporate shows and not independent creators. Not at all. So we got to fight against the man by having you help us out by like, comment, share, subscribe. If you feel so inclined, we thank you very much. As always, for the great Dr. Gene Bramall and the fantastic Sigmund Bloom, I'm Cecil Lammey saying thank you. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.